Palm Sunday comes about because of a major event which was taking place in Jerusalem. It was the Passover time, and the Passover always brought with it a huge amount of expectation amongst the people. It's thought that the population of Jerusalem rose from about 50,000 in normal times to about 500,000 for Passover, as people came into the city from all around Israel to celebrate the Passover. It was going to be a week of huge festivities, of ritual, of celebration, of remembering the deliverance that had taken place centuries before when God delivered his people out of Egypt and out of slavery. This huge influx of people that came into Jerusalem always started to draw the attention of the oppressors of the Jew, the Romans, who were now in control of Jerusalem. There was this uneasy tension that was in the city, and there was always the threat of an uprising that could take place. And as they celebrated their past, they were keenly aware of their present. They celebrated the deliverance out of Egypt, but realized that even now they were not free. They were under this tyrannical oppressor, the Roman Empire. And they longed to be free. And they longed that might be now. The Roman authorities had also remembered that years earlier there had been an uprising. Just after the death of Herod the Great, there were some Jewish zealots thought this was our moment. This is our freedom date. This is when we can finally get free from Rome, only to be crushed again by the Roman Empire. And it's thought that over 2,000 Jews were crucified at that time because they were part of this uprising. The Roman authorities made no secret of their total intolerance of any form of rebellion. They were going to squash it. And they made sure that the Jewish population was always fully aware of their intent. They wanted to maintain law and order, and they would, and it would be Roman style. In their book, The Last Week, by Marcus Borg and John Dominique, they make this comment. They say that you might not know that Jesus' procession into Jerusalem was not the only procession the city saw that day. In the year 30 AD, Roman historians record that the governor of Judah, Pontius Pilate, led a procession of Roman cavalry and centurions into the city of Jerusalem. Get the picture. Let's see the scene. Against the backdrop of the Jews preparing for their Passover, Pontius Pilate arrives in town. He's come with from his preferred headquarters, which was Caesarea by the sea, and of course living by the sea would be much more favourable than living in crowded or coming to crowded, stuffy Jerusalem with the threat of uprising. This was a pretty inconvenient time for Pontius Pilate. It's thought that he would have come in from the western side of the city, leading a crack troop of some of his elite soldiers, fully trained, hardened to battle, always keen and ready to put down any uprising that might occur. They were in chariots, and there were horses decked in all their splendour and impressive glory. Centurions were leading their troops in with all their shiny leather and their great helmets, and the sun was just glistening on it all. It would have been an amazing sight. It would have you would have stood in awe on the street as you watched this procession come to town. Centurions were leading their troops in. They marched to the drummers. We had a drummer this morning. They marched to the drummers, beating the cadence of the walk in. It was an amazing sight. It was no ordinary procession, because this procession had the intent and commitment that they were going to squash any uprising, any trouble that might arise in the city. It was a display of power and authority. It was full of pomp and ceremony, all designed to intimidate the Jewish population. What they were saying to the Jewish people of Jerusalem was, don't mess with Rome. You do so at your peril. Herod Antipas, Herod the Tetrarch, had also made his way into Jerusalem. The power of Rome, the representatives of Caesar, were making their point. Passover, yes. Trouble, no. But there was another procession that was forming and making its way into the city. This one had no pomp, no ceremony, no troops, no shiny armour, nothing that would intimidate, nothing that would strike fear into the heart of anybody. It is Jesus of Nazareth, the carpenter, not on a war horse, but riding on a donkey, not in an elaborate chariot, not surrounded by his troops, but surrounded by a few noisy people. And we read from Zechariah 9 this morning, "Rejoice, O people of Zion, shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, yet he is humble, riding on a donkey, riding on a donkey's colt." This was a unique situation for Jesus. It's the first time we read of Jesus rising himself above the level of the people around him. It's the first time we read of Jesus riding on anything. He was making a unique statement in this entry into Jerusalem. This was Jesus declaring himself at last to be their king. And something that he would affirm later to Pilate when Pilate said to him in his trial, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he tells Pilate, "I am what you say." The two processions could not be more different in the messages that they convey. Pilate leading centurions, leading a force that was equipped for battle in every sense of the word, ready to crush anybody who opposed them. Jesus, riding on a donkey, embodies the sense of peace and tranquility and calm. No show of power, no show of glory, just something to bring in that shalom, that peace that God brings to his people. Those who watched that day were going to make a choice. They would either serve the God of this world, the might and the power and the splendor that goes with that, or they would choose to serve the king of a different kingdom, a king of peace, a king of glory, a future king of a future kingdom. And that's a choice we're going to make today as well. And Jesus showed up. Who were the people in the crowd that followed Jesus that day? Because there was a crowd around. It wasn't just a few disciples, the 12 or so, or 11 or so that were around, that were key, the 12 there. That there were lots of people who gathered around Jesus on that day. And there are people who represented different walks of life, different attitudes towards Jesus. And it may be this morning that as we identify some of these people, that we find that we're part of that crowd as well. When Jesus shows up, see, he draws out from us a response. And we have to align ourselves with one of those responses and say, well, that's me, or that's not me, or that's my heart, that's not my heart. And the first group that were there were the mockers. These were the people who thought, as they saw this happening, this is a ridiculous thing that's going on here. He's a make-believe king. Kings ride horses. Kings don't ride donkeys. Real kings come with all the regalia and all the splendor and all the glory that kings and the trappings that go with kings. They don't come throwing a few coats on a donkey and leading a donkey procession. That's not what kings do. Surely this is some sort of a joke. Perhaps these guys are actually trying to mock the king. Perhaps they're trying to mock Caesar. Perhaps they're trying to ridicule him and say, this is how kings are. The carpenter and his merry men stirring up trouble again. and they would have been mocking. There were the antagonists. These were the people who knew the prophecy of Zechariah. They knew that there was a Messiah coming. They knew that he would be riding on a donkey. As Lloyd pointed out, 550 years before this had been told about, they knew all of that. They could have quoted the story. So is he trying to play act the prophecy? Is he trying to make it look like this is true when really it's not? For them it would be blasphemy if that was the case. These antagonists weren't the ones who were waving the palm branches and throwing their cloaks down and singing Hosanna to God in the highest. These were the people on the fringes who were murmuring and questioning and asking what it was all about. They were hanging back. They were angry at the proposed blasphemy. You see, ever since the raising of Lazarus, these people had been saying, how can we kill him? What can we do to trap him? Where can we go? What can we do? They were thinking of ways that they could hold him accountable for this weird delusion of make-believe kingship. Following in the crowd would have been those who had been healed. Those who had been on the mountainside when Jesus had taken a little boy's lunch and broken up some fish and some bread and given it to his disciples and said, now feed this lot. You didn't know how it was going to happen. You thought you had to go to the local pack and save down the road and buy enough bread and find that they wouldn't have enough. But I've got enough here in this little boy's lunch. You go and feed these 15 to 20,000 people. And to their amazement, as they kept handing it out, it just kept coming. And when they cleaned it up afterwards, there were 12 baskets full. There was some of that crowd that would have been around Jerusalem at that point. They would have recognized, he's the man who fed us on the mountainside. In the Matthew account, just before you get to the triumphal entry stage, you find that there's blind Bartimaeus and his mate, and they're sitting on the side of the road begging, and they hear that Jesus is coming, and they're calling out to Jesus, heal us, come, Son of David, heal us, do something. And the crowd tried to shut them up and say, keep quiet, he's on a mission. But Jesus stopped, and he healed him. I wonder if Bartimaeus was amongst that crowd. There were the lame who could walk now, who weren't able to walk, and they were there following Jesus. The blind who couldn't see where they're going, now they could see where they're going. There were the lepers who couldn't mix with the crowd before, but now they can mix freely with the crowd, and so they wanted to be where Jesus was. You see, this was their day. This was a moment where they could honor him. This was a day where they could, in a real sense, because of what he was displaying to them, say, thank you, my King. There were those that had heard him teach and were amazed at his teaching. You see, he didn't teach like the Pharisees in the temple. This man taught with authority. He talked like he had inside knowledge that nobody else had. He just had it, and they were encouraged and comforted and motivated and driven by this man's teaching. They were there. There are those that had witnessed the raising of Lazarus and thought, wow, what a day that was. And now here he is, back in town. There were the expectant ones. These were the noisy ones in the crowd. These were the ones who were waving their palm branches and singing the hosannas. These were the ones who all of a sudden realized that this was the day when Rome was going to be overthrown, the oppressors would be dealt with, a new king had come, and it was all going to be good from here on in. It was going to be a great day, and they were ready to place a crown on his head. They were ready to give him allegiance. They wanted to be where he was. They could hardly believe that this day had happened after a lifetime of expectation and wondering when, knowing that their forefathers had also waited for centuries for the king to arrive in Jerusalem and take his place on the throne. They were expecting great things from him. The disciples were there too. Not long before this, they had been arguing who's going to be on the right side and who's going to be on the left, Jesus, when you set up your kingdom. They got Mum to speak for them too and say, hey Jesus, my boys, they've been good. Can one be on your left and one on your right? They're jostling for a place in the kingdom, and in the euphoria of the moment as they saw what was happening and perhaps goaded by the whole situation, thought, wow, this is our day too. We've been the ones that have been closest to Jesus. We're close to getting to the right and close to getting to the left. We're going to be leaders within this new kingdom. It all seemed to be coming together for them. They hadn't yet clicked to what was really happening in Jesus' walk and life. And then there was Jesus. Jesus knew all this. He knew the hearts of the people around him, how fickle they were. He knew that by the end of the week, the crowd that was now singing Hosanna was going to be singing, Crucify him. In Luke chapter 9 and verse 51, we're reminded that Jesus resolutely set a course to go to Jerusalem. He knew what lay ahead of him when he got there, but he wasn't going to be sidetracked by that. Were you amongst that crowd? There were those who were there who also had soft hearts, unsure about where it was all going, but knowing that Jesus was on a mission, and they were just taking it steady. It was said of Mary on occasions that when she was told things about him, she took them and she just pondered them in her heart. She just waited. She knew that this son that she had born was about a different kingdom, about a different mission. And today we too will make a decision about two kingdoms and two kings. We can choose the kingdom of darkness, headed by the devil, the prince of darkness. Or we can choose the kingdom of light, headed by Jesus, the Prince of Light. Let's just hear the story again, this time from Luke. This was Luke's account of that story, and he draws attention to some of the people who were in the crowd. In Luke chapter 19 and verse 28, and after Jesus had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. And as he approached Bethphage and Bethany, at the hill called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples, saying to them, go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, why are you untying it? Tell him, the Lord needs it. And those who went ahead went and found it just as he had told them. And as they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, why are you untying the colt? They replied, the Lord needs it. They brought it to Jesus, threw their cloaks on the colt and put Jesus on it. And as he went along, people started to spread their cloaks on the road. And when he came near to the place where the road goes down to the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. And some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. I tell you, he replied, that if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out. And as he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. And he said, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side, and they will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you.